movement decided to take the issue to the South African Human Rights Commission, and the South African Human Rights Commission 2 years later, in 2014, declared that the cancellation was actually in violation of the rights of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, which had in fact booked the theatre and demanded that the Rabia Theatre within 3 months must rescreen the movie. Unfortunately, the Rabia Theatre passed the 3-month deadline and refused to screen the movie. And this is when then the Palestine Solidarity Committee, together with the assistance of the Legal Resource Center, took the issue to the Equality Court. That's a very long background to the issue.
Now, Muhammad, some may say that the actual fight is out there on the borders of the Gaza Strip or in Masjid al-Aqsa and its surrounds of Jerusalem, or in the occupied territories of the West Bank. Why, the fight here? Why is this such an important fight in the artistic world of South Africa?
So I think that currently, as we see what Donald Trump is doing with the UAE and trying to forge relations for Israel and other countries, Israel's legitimacy across the world counts. And one place in which Israel has found legitimacy or tries to find legitimacy is by projecting itself as a outpost of Western European culture. And so the cultural boycott and the academic boycott in particular, the isolation of Israel within these two sectors in specific becomes very important. Whereas during the anti-apartheid struggle, the white South Africa was sports mad. And that is why the international community focused on the sports boycott. Likewise, the Israeli society is obsessed about being part of a Western European culture. And so it's becoming increasingly isolated within these spaces does have an effect on the psyche of the oppressive society. And we're hoping that with this sort of isolation, the Israeli, that within Israel will start seeing some sort of changes. I think that for us at Africa, for Palestine, this case of the Labia Theatre is important because it shows the maturity of Palestine solidarity activism in this country. That once the cancellation took place, it wasn't just about a protest outside the Labia Theatre, which did take place by community members. However, there was also follow through, and this is where we salute the activists that have actually followed through in terms of ensuring that the South African Human Rights Commission has passed judgment on this, that now it's being heard at the Equality Court, and that will take this all the way up to the highest levels of our judiciary to ensure that the rights of the Palestine solidarity movement in this country are not trampled the way in which it's trampled in certain other countries, which are far more unfriendly to the Palestinian solidarity movement. Because there was a time in which the mere mention of Palestine was criminalized. However, I do think that both our media in this country, avenues like Salam Media, including together with our communities, have made sure that the Palestinian issue doesn't just get reduced to a footnote, and that it has become part of not only our political discourse, but also part of our cultural discourse in this country.
Interesting, you mentioned the UAE and developments there between Israel and this Arab state and the United States itself. We've also seen a number of attempts to come within South Africa right now. There are programs being arranged where South Africans are participating in events hosted by the UAE. Should we be looking at that also with a critical eye right now as to why are they supporting activities of a country that has so, unashamedly associated itself with Israel?
Well, on the one hand, it's disgusting. It's disgusting what we are seeing in terms of the selling out of the Arab countries. For a long time, we always knew that there was problematic support, that there was underhanded support from certain sectors within the Arab world. But for it to be coming so brazen from the UAE is really disappointing, I think. But in some ways, it sharpens the contradictions. It doesn't allow this idea that there is a friend when there is no friend. And I think that you are spot on, Azhar, that the Israeli lobby is going to be increasingly using Arab initiatives around the world, but specifically in South Africa as well, to try and blunt the Palestine solidarity movement. And this is a time in which our various Palestine solidarity organizations, together with the embassy and the various political parties, need to ensure that we remain a united force, because there will be attempts to try to divide us on various issues, using both the Arab countries in this, the Arab embassies in this country, but also by trying to use certain differences that there may be within the various organizations and support for the Palestinian cause. But I do think, Azhar, that our South African society and our public and our various communities, listeners of Salam Media in particular, have consistently and principally been behind the Palestinian struggle in this country. And I do think that we're going to not only pass this current storm in which we're seeing an increasing amount of selling out by various Arab regimes, but we are also going to, inshallah, see a free Palestine in our lifetime.
From a practical point of view, regarding this issue with the screening of the documentary, what can South Africans do? How can they show their support?
Well, I think three things. The first is that we must, in some ways, the screening or the banning of the screening has in some ways backfired, because the movie is now getting far more attention. The movie is called Roadmap to Apartheid, and we encourage listeners to go out onto YouTube, where the movie is freely available, and you can arrange screenings not only for your family but also for within your community to educate people around the issue. The second is that we are asking members of the public to support the Equality Court case, to follow the case that is being heard currently. We do hope for a favorable response, and that when the response does come out, when the ruling does come out, to celebrate this ruling that as one of both a celebration of freedom of expression in our country, but also of the resilience of the Palestine solidarity movement in this country, which is in many ways propelled and made stronger by community support. And the third is, of course, for members of the community during this time in particular, to join the movement on social media by supporting the various organizations that are standing in solidarity with the Palestinian people.
Muhammed Desai, the Director of Africa for Palestine, Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing those words with us. As always, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes